Thanks. Well, I'm reminded of a quote by C.S. Lewis when he said that when you're only given 10 minutes to talk, you have to sacrifice pretty much everything to brevity. So even though I have to be brief in my remarks and reply, I'm going to try to make three main points here. First main point is this. I think that the points that Professor McCormick just brought up, and I hope he takes some of his 10 minutes to elaborate on the ones he didn't get to earlier, because I think those are good points too. But I think the points that he brought up are not only interesting, but fascinating. And I think they deserve to be carefully thought through. These are exactly the sorts of honest, straightforward conversations we should be having within the walls of all of our churches, or for that matter, our mosques and synagogues and temples. The second main point, however, is that I'm going to try to steal a strategy in debate from Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln was known for trying to admit as many of the points of his opponent to be as strong as possible, and still holding on to Lincoln's own conclusion. So I actually think that even if we allow each of Professor McCormick's points to be as strong as possible, it's not clear that we have to give up any of the four facts that I mentioned in my opening statement. Indeed, I would suggest that it's remarkable that within the field of New Testament studies, even the specialists who study these documents night and day, and who have come from a wide variety of theological persuasions, whether they're Catholic or Protestant, or whether they're agnostic or atheist, still have been able to reach a substantial consensus about some of the facts, and the four that I mentioned are among them. I hope that Professor McCormick can also use some of his time in responding to some of the opening statements that I made about the particulars behind the four facts. But until then, I think we're actually within our rights to continue believing in those four facts, since the specialists who study them, who study these documents, and who are aware of many of the tendencies within human beings, still are reasonably confident in the four that I mentioned. Okay, so my third main idea is this. I think that several of the points that Professor McCormick brought up do not need to be as strong as possible. In other words, I think they're of limited relevance, or of partial relevance to the resurrection. And in some cases, they may even support the idea of the resurrection itself. Let me take just a couple of them. I'm not going to dispute with Professor McCormick on the dates that he brought up, but I would suggest that if you compare the New Testament documents with many other kinds of documents of ancient history, whether it's the 1st century or even farther back, you'll find that the textual evidence that we have in favor of certain events in the New Testament is much stronger than the textual evidence we have for certain other kinds of events within ancient history, dealing with Caesar and the Gallic Wars, or dealing with other kinds of events within ancient Greece. I don't have the numbers to give you here, but I believe that even given the fact that there were these gaps in time where they didn't have as much written down, and where they had to copy things for a long period of time, when you compare those same kinds of dates with other kinds of documents for secular history, you'll find that the New Testament documents measure up quite well. Another thing I should point out related to the point in Professor McCormick's presentation deals with the issue of canonization. That is, people deciding at a certain point that we need to figure out which of the many different religious documents are the ones we should keep and prioritize as the most important and the most reliable. Now, there were many factors influencing the kinds of editorial decisions that people had to make when they were thinking through what's really part of the canon. Some of them dealt with persecution, right? If a Roman soldier shows up at your door and says, "Give me all of your religious documents," you have to have some reliable way of saying, okay, we're going to give the soldiers these, but we're not going to give them the other ones. Okay, so there was already a lot of this going on, even before the official church councils, where they tried to make up these long lists and arguments. So when they finally reached the councils and trying to decide, okay, which of these are we going to count as bona fide, there were two main criteria that they used for deciding which ones would be reliable. One of these criteria was the idea of apostolicity, which just means, was this document written by an apostle or someone who claimed to know an apostle? Another criteria that they often used was use. Right? Is this document one that is widely used in a large geographical area? Or is it something that someone is only using in this one little part of the world? And so it might have cropped up saying, okay, this is a really authentic document, but nobody else happens to have any copies.